We were looking at chapter 5 of Gide's novel, Straight is the Gate. In this chapter, we see the aftermath of Juliet's sickness. So in the last chapter, we saw how Juliet was overwhelmed by the tension regarding who would be her future husband, and her love for Jerome was unreciprocated. And as she realized that Jerome could not even think of loving her, therefore she thought of taking some kind of a revenge on the world by yielding herself to Edouard Tessier. Ultimately, she will get married to him, and we will see how this person, Edouard, appears to be a very tenacious lover, and he wins the girl. So even though he does not have any romantic traits, he is a businessman, he is a vine grower, and does not seem to have apparently much grace of physical or even intellectual capabilities. Yet he wins Juliet's hand. And I suppose that this is a commentary on how things work in the real world. Therefore, love, even though is a very strong passion, yet it often, maybe because it is such a strong passion, it often makes lovers make strange decisions. So this Juliet accepting Edouard on the rebound, we do not find any rationality behind this, and it is some kind of a sentimental act, because nobody in reality can take revenge upon a lover who does not recognize the love, or upon the world. Therefore, it is a kind of a sentimental knee-jerk reaction of a teenager or a very young girl. But sometimes the big decisions are made in a whimsical fashion. So let us look at chapter 5. Jerome received a letter from his aunt, where Elisa wrote this letter to the aunt, where she pleaded that Jerome should not come to the Bucolas because that would disturb Juliet, and Jerome felt that he was alone, shut out from the Bucolas place. And both Jerome and Abel, they leave Le Havre, and one of them goes to England and the other goes to Paris. When Jerome is meditating and studying in Paris, he has Elisa's letters to fall back to. And since this is a kind of, this is the beginning of the separation between Elisa and Jerome, because after this event, the two of them strangely would try to avoid a meeting, and they would try to continue this communication through letters, thus giving the excuse to Gide for using the epistolary method. Elisa writes finally to Jerome, "Forgive me, my dear Jerome, for not having written to you sooner. Our poor Juliet's state has allowed me very little time. Since you went away, I have hardly left her. I begged aunt to give you news of us," and so on. So this letter does not give any new information apart from bridging the discontinuity between communication between the two of them, because the last letter was written to aunt, even though it was meant for conveying a message to Jerome. So now she again writes to Jerome directly. Elisa and Juliet's younger brother Robert, who studies in Paris in the School of Agriculture, is more or less a kind of a stupid boy. Jerome does not like him at all, but now he began to give him more time because he cannot have access to his sisters. So through Robert he tries to please Elisa, and through Robert he learned that Edouard Teissier had come to inquire for Juliet very assiduously, but when Robert had left Le Havre she had not yet seen him. I learned that Juliet had kept up an obstinate silence towards her sister, which nothing had been able to break down. Initially, Juliet did not accept the visits of Edouard either, and she did not speak to Elisa for a very long time. So from this information we come to know about Juliet's state of mind and the fact that she was unhappy with both Edouard and her sister for various reasons. But basically she was most unhappy with Jerome, but since Jerome did not recognize her love, therefore she could do nothing about it. Time passed. So 2 paragraphs consecutively mention time passed. I received from Elisa nothing but the most elusive notes. Time passed. Then one morning of sudden spring came a letter from Elisa to my aunt. So this letter again written by Elisa to the aunt, and Jerome is extremely unhappy that the letter is not written to him. But if we look at the letter, then we will see that it is all about Jerome, which when Jerome gives the letter to Abel to read, then he makes the same observation that it is all about you. And here Elisa writes that the marriage of Juliet may not turn out so badly. Certainly Juliet does not love him, but he seems to me every week to be less unworthy of her love. That is, Edouard is gaining as a constant lover. He is gaining his ground. He is gaining trust and confidence in both Juliet and her household. And this makes us think about constancy in love once again. Then she refers to Jerome and thanks him indirectly for looking after Robert. And she speaks of a gift that Jerome had given her. Those words of scripture which I used to repeat without very well understanding them have suddenly become clear to me. Cursed be the man that trusted in man. Long before coming across them in my Bible, I had read them on a little Christmas card which Jerome sent me when he was not quite 12 years old and when I was just 14. Beside the bunch of flowers which was painted on it and which was then thought lovely, there were these lines from a paraphrase of Corneille's. And she quotes 4 lines of verse, and she mistakenly refers to the writer as Corneille, the 17th century French dramatist and poet. But the true writer of these verses was Racine, and this fact is corrected by Elisa herself later, and Jerome and others, they comment that Elisa made this mistake. Now I do not know why Gilles introduces this mistake or misquotation. Maybe because he wanted to make it more convincing that a writer often quotes from memory and makes mistakes about the source. because I do not think that Reed himself made the mistake and later corrected it, because he would write after most assiduous research, and there is no question of making a mistake between Corneille and Racine. So these 4 lines Jerome had written on this card. Quel charme vainqueur du monde, Verdiu m'élève aujourd'hui, malgré l'homme qui fonde sur les hommes son appui. These verses are collected in a book of poems by Racine called Notre Dame the Poet. Jean Racine, you may be aware, was the greatest writer of plays in the 17th century. But what you may not be aware is that Racine was a Jansenist. Therefore, in Racine's writings, we often find an expression of the Jansenist religious point of view. On this issue, the French critic Roland Barthes has. So the meaning of these lines are a paraphrase, in the sense that they are a paraphrase of the Songs of Songs or Canticle of Canticles in the Bible, and these verses are supposedly written by Saint John of the Cross. The meaning of these verses: what charm, that is winner of the world, elevates me today to God? Unhappy man who founds his happiness on men. So this is the paraphrase of the line, cursed be the man that trusted in man. Unhappy man who founds his happiness on men. The origin of this speech is Jeremiah in the Old Testament. And Elisa writes, I confess I infinitely prefer the simple text out of Jeremiah. No doubt Jerome chose the card at the time without paying much attention to the lines, but if I am to judge from his letters, his frame of mind at present is not unlike mine, and every day I thank God that he should have brought us both nearer to him with one and the same stroke. So here we learn that from the age of 12 and 14, Jerome and Elisa, they have had a kind of religious temperament, and they were exchanging, religious verses or religious books or quotations from the scriptures endlessly. So the very early influence of religion, and particularly of Jansenism, on these two has been alluded to here, but the morbid turn to religion by Elisa, that is yet to come. Jerome is very angry that such nice words and such beautiful letter is sent to the aunt instead of to him, because Elisa usually exchanged such literary and religious ideas with Jerome. But now she is doing that with the aunt. At this, Jerome gets very, very much peeved. And Abel truly diagnoses Jerome's problem and says, no, my dear fellow, nothing in the letter irritates you except the fact that it is not addressed to you. And then Abel says, let us study this paper, as if it is a very serious document of research, worthy of research. And he spreads the letter out on his writing table. The first thing that he says, we will consign the Juliet Tessier affair to the fire of love. We know what the flame is worth. Upon my word, Tessier seems just the kind of moth to singe his wings in it. So there is a kind of a jealous bad mouthing of Edward Tessier here. Abel is jealous of him, and says that Tessier is a stupid lover and like stupid moths who burn themselves in the fire. Similarly, Tessier is the type who is going to burn himself in Juliet's love. So let us think of him more as a sacrifice in love than as anything serious. The rest, he said, the rest is all for you. And you don't have anything to complain, not a line, not a word that is not filled with the thought of you. You may say the whole letter is addressed to you. When Aunt Felicie sent it on to you, she merely sent it to its rightful owner. What can Corneille's lines, which by the way are by Racine, maybe Abel corrects it, matter to your aunt? So why should Corneille or Racine be quoted to the aunt? You are nothing but a simpleton if a fortnight hence your cousin is writing to you just as lengthily, as easily, as easily. So Abel says that this is the beginning. She is warming up by writing to the aunt, but she actually wants to write to you, and you can expect her letters within a fortnight, and which comes to be true. So Abel is a better reader of human nature than Jerome. It only depends upon you for her to take it. Do you want my advice? That is, since her love is also dedicated to you, therefore you have to take it. How will you take it? What should be your steps? If you take my advice, then do not say a word forever so long of love or marriage. Don't you see that since her sister's misfortune, it is that she is set against. So, very psychologically profound remark that Abel makes here. That at this moment, Elisa is unhappy that her sister's love did not turn out as they all thought it should. And therefore right now she is against love and marriage. Therefore you do not speak about these things to her. But something very interesting, he says that you harp on the string of brother. That is, you keep talking about Robert, and by talking about him you can gradually, enter into her heart. Harp on the fraternal string and talk to her untiringly of Robert, since you have the patience to look after the young ass. Just go on amusing her intelligence, all the rest will follow. If it were only I who had to write to her. So Abel feels that he knows how to reply to Elisa or how to write to Elisa, but Jerome says that you are not worthy to love her. This is very funny. Abel is not worthy to love Elisa, and he is rejected by Juliet. But as it turns out that later he becomes a famous writer of plays. But we will see that Elisa is unhappy with Abel turning out a playwright, because by that time Elisa lost interest, much of her interest in literature, and became interested only in religion. So here we have the information about Juliet's marriage. Her marriage was to take place in July. Elisa wrote to me that she supposed that at this date Abel and I would be engaged in our studies, by which she meant that you should not come to Juliet's marriage. I understood that she judged it better for us not to appear at the ceremony. So we alleged some examination or other and contented ourselves with sending our good wishes. A fortnight after the marriage, Jerome receives another letter from Elisa. And here Elisa gives the true source of the lines and corrects herself that these lines are not from Corneille but from Racine. And then a much longer quotation from the poem is given here in French, unfortunately for you. Imagine my astonishment yesterday on opening at random the charming Racine you gave me. So Jerome had gifted her with a book of Racine's poems. I found the 4 lines which are on your little old Christmas card that I had kept in my Bible for the last 10 years. Again those 4 lines. I had thought they came from a paraphrase of Corneille's, and I admit I didn't think much of them, but as I went on reading the 4th Cantique Spirituel, I came across some verses which are so beautiful. So, Cantique Spirituel is the French of the spiritual canticles, or as it is called, canticle of canticles, or sometimes Song of Songs. And in this poem, the medieval author, the French poem, which is written by a medieval author or a paraphrase of the Song of Songs, the love between a Christian and Christ is described in terms of love between bride and bridegroom. And the bridegroom wants to kiss the bride. Therefore, this song has many physical, expression of physical desire, the desire to kiss or other physical desires expressed here. And interestingly, I remember that the New England Puritan father, John Cotton, he had written a sermon on the Song of Songs, and he explains each and every expression in this poem, which are physical expressions, kissing or other. So he explains them spiritually, and the Song of Songs therefore is very popular, and we may say that it is also an example of Hebrew poetry. Elisa writes that I copied some verses from the Cantique Spirituel, and then he writes down this long poem, and I am not going to translate it. And then after this, she writes, "How beautiful, Jerome, how beautiful. Do you really think it as beautiful as I do?" A little note in my edition says that Madame de Maintenon, when she heard Mademoiselle Domal sing this hymn, seemed struck with admiration, dropped a few tears. So I may just say that in this French quotation, the appearance of God in the Eucharist as bread, that has been mentioned, and therefore this poem in a way refers to the satiating of spiritual hunger of a Christian, and it is a mix of a metaphorical mix of the ideas of eating, drinking, or satisfying needs, which metaphorically stand for spiritual needs, though apparently these are physical needs. So Elisa is full of praise of it and says that I regret that I didn't hear you reading this. The news from our travelers continues to be very good. That is, Juliet and Edouard, after their marriage, they were traveling through Europe and Italy and other places. You know already how much Juliet enjoyed Bayonne and Biarritz. They visited Fontarabia, Burgos, and crossed the Pyrenees twice, and now writing from Montserrat. They think of spending 10 days longer at Barcelona before they return to Nîmes, where Edouard wants to be back before September, so as to be able to look up the vintage. We get the information that Robert has failed in his examination. Elisa continues to take care of his father, and then she expresses how she misses Jerome. Nothing is changed here in the garden. Why? I tell myself so every day, for it is hard to stay so long without seeing you. Sometimes I look for you involuntarily. I stop in the middle of what I am reading. I turn my head quickly. It seems as though you were there. So in Alisa's imagination, Jerome's presence is real, and she imagines that sometimes she might suddenly encounter him in the garden. And something like this happens later when Jerome comes to visit. Alisa was there in the garden and she just casually receives him as if this was what she was expecting. Jerome is very much carried away with emotion by reading these letters. You can easily imagine with what transports of joy I read this letter, with what sobs of love. Other letters followed. Alisa, it is true, thanked me for not coming to Fungusmar. It is true she begged me not to try and see her again this year, but she regretted my absence. Now you see the contradiction here, that on the one hand, Alisa regrets Jerome's absence. On the other hand, she repeatedly tells him not to come, thus extending their separation. But she regretted my absence, she wanted me. From page to page there sounded the same appeal. Where did I find strength to resist it? In Abel's advice, no doubt, and in the fear of suddenly ruining my joy, and in an instinctive stiffening of my will against the inclinations of my heart. So, he wanted to go to Fungusmar, but he stopped because somehow he was stiffening in his heart. That is, by not going, by repeatedly deferring his visits and not meeting Alisa, a kind of, inertia, we may say, or a kind of coldness was coming in between them, and they were both accepting this, separation and this coldness. The next letter also gives a lot of information and what they discussed about St. Francis. How did we manage to be silent during so many long months? No doubt we were hibernating. May that frightful winter of our silence be forever past. Now that I have found you again, life, thought, our souls, everything seems beautiful, adorable, inexhaustibly fertile. So this letter indicates that there was some silence between them before they started writing again. Then we see from the letters, we learn about Jerome's traveling. Jerome was also traveling in Italy, particularly from place to place. Bottom of page 70. Don't be afraid, though, of my becoming an ignoramus. I have been reading a great deal lately. With the help of a few rainy days, I have, as it were, folded my adoration up into my books, finished Malebranche, and began at once Leibniz's letters to Clark. So this is a heavy reading for a young woman. Malebranche and Leibniz, both are philosophers, but as we can see that Alisa was reading them. Then as a rest, read Shelley's Cenci. So she was reading philosophy as work, but when she wanted rest, then she read poetry, suggesting that it is much easier to read poetry. Shelley's Cenci she did not like. Read The Sensitive Plant too. I shall make you very indignant, but I would give nearly all Shelley and all Byron for Keats's 4 odes, which we read together last summer. So in this preference of Keats over Shelley and Byron, we see the literary taste in Alisa developing, and she reads a lot of foreign literature, that is, for her English is a foreign literature. She also reads German literature, Leibniz, which we read together, just as I would give all Hugo for a few of Baudelaire's sonnets. So Hugo more or less wrote in the conventional pattern, and he was a very prolific writer and poet, but Baudelaire wrote a completely new kind of poetry and was the guru of modern symbolic poets in France. Therefore, comparing Baudelaire to Hugo would also indicate how Alice's literary taste was developing in the right direction. Believe me, if you were with me, I could not think of you more. I should be sorry to give you pain, but I have come to the point of no longer wanting your presence now. So, this is just 1 degree advance from accepting of separation. So, initially they accepted their separation, then they became habituated with this separation, then they did not like the presence of one another or each other anymore. Shall I confess, if I knew you were coming this evening, I should fly away. Oh, don't ask me to explain this feeling, please. I only know that I think of you unceasingly and that I am happy so. Now, both Elisa and Jerome suffer from this idea that if they think of each other and if they feel that they love each other, then there is no need for meeting. So their love becomes more and more ethereal, more and more in the realm of ideas than any desire of physically meeting each other. And in this fashion, the correspondence continues, and the separation between Elisa and Jerome is now more than a year, or almost a year had gone by since our last meeting. She seemed not to consider this, but to count her time of waiting only from now onwards. So, 1 whole year Elisa won't count. And she writes that we felt each other's presence through our letters. Was I not with you in Italy? Ungrateful. I never left you for a single day. So in this fashion, Elisa justified that the separation is not as long as it appears, because they were mentally with each other. A year, I don't count the days that have already gone by. My hope fastens its gaze on that point in the future, which is slowly drawing nearer. Do you remember the low wall that shelters the chrysanthemums at the end of the garden, and how sometimes we used to venture along the top of it? Juliet and you walked on it as boldly as though you were Mussulmans going straight to paradise. As for me, I was seized with giddiness after the first step or two, and you used to call to me from below, don't look at your feet, eyes front, and so on. And then, at last, it was more of a help than your words. You would climb onto the wall at the other end and wait for me. Then I no longer trembled, I no longer felt giddy, I no longer saw anything but you. I ran until I reached your open arms. Without faith in you, Jerome, what would become of me? I have need to feel you strong, need to lean on you, don't weaken. So what do we gather from these confessions or these statements of Elisa? Elisa has a great faith in Jerome, but this faith almost seems to be some kind of it is similar to religious faith. So she wants to see Saint Jerome rather than the man Jerome, and she thinks of Jerome almost as a saint, and she wants him to succeed as a saint. She wants him to go to heaven through the narrow gate, through the straight gate. So this kind of an attitude towards her lover would make her more and more detest the worldly kind of love. So now they are more or less habituated with postponing their meeting and extending their waiting. Out of a sort of a spirit of defiance which made us deliberately prolong our time of waiting, Out of fear too of an unsatisfactory meeting, we agreed that I should spend my few days leave at Christmas with Miss Ashburton in Paris. So they agreed that in Christmas Jerome would not go to Fongismar, but would live in Paris with Miss Ashburton. As they were prolonging their separation without any reason, and as Jerome says here that they were even afraid that their meeting might not be so satisfactory. And when Jerome meets Elisa, finally, then unfortunately that is what happens, that they find their meeting very, the meeting very unsatisfactory. It does not lead to the extended happiness that they had imagined. Then Abel's book appears and Elisa writes about it. Elisa buys a copy. I am grateful to Abel for not having sent me his book. I have not been able to look through it without shame. Shame not so much because of the book itself, in which after all I see more folly than indecency, but shame to think that Abel Bhoti, your friend, should have written it. I searched in vain from page to page for the great talent which the thought reviewer had discovered in it. In our little society of Le Havre, where Abel is often mentioned, people say that the book is very successful. So even though people consider the book to be very successful, Elisa is ashamed of the book. Why? Because she feels that the book is too worldly and it does not mention religion much, and that she thinks is shameful. What will it be when the new Abelard is brought out? Here it is going to be acted at some theatre or other on the boulevard. So Abel is writing a play called The New Abelard. Abelard, was a 12th century monk who fell in love with a nun, and they exchanged letters, and these letters are very famous in French literature. Abelard and Eloise. Now, Abel's new play, so the name Abel reminds one of Abelard, and the name Jerome reminds one of Saint Jerome, or even maybe Jeremiah. Now, this play is going to be published and it would be performed, and Elisa feels it to be scandalous that such plays are going to be performed. All human glory, poor Abel, is that really the success he wants? Will he be satisfied with that? So for Elisa, the meaning of success has changed. And worldly success does not appear to her to be success at all. And then she speaks of the interior consolation, which is a part of the Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. Yesterday in the interior consolation, I read these words: all human glory, indeed all temporal honor, all worldly grandeur, compared with thy eternal glory, is vanity and foolishness. And I thought, O God, I thank thee that thou hast chosen Jerome for thy celestial glory, compared with which the other is vanity and foolishness. This is the third book, Thomas à Kempis. So we see in which position Elisa places Jerome. She places him on the pedestal of a saint. So she imagines that Jerome will not be as vain as Abel. Next page, page 74. Again in Elisa's letter, she informs Jerome about Juliet, Okay, so let me continue. There is some problem with my camera here. So in this letter, Alisa writes, she reflects on happiness, and she thinks of Juliet. Juliet asked her whether she was writing to Jerome. And Jerome, what has become of him? Does he write to you still? And as I couldn't but tell her the truth, when you write to him, she said, tell him that. She hesitated a moment, and then, smiling very sweetly, went on, that I am cured. So this statement from Juliet suggests that she wants Jerome to know that she is no longer suffering from the rejection, okay, that she has come to accept her marriage and so on. So I am taking here a 3 minutes break. I have also set the camera right. So I'll come back after 3 minutes.